Okay, so we're going to have progress. Now today, our hope is because we have chapters 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So, and these particular chapters are kind of like where the emphasis is, as we talked about the Gospel of Mark, which has three sections to it, a Galilee section, a journey to Jerusalem section, and then the session in Jerusalem itself. And so that's what's going to happen to us today, is that we're going to take chapter 18 and possibly 19. And if we get done with that, I'm going to impose on you once again. And you said, well, we should have brought something to sustain us. Oh my goodness, food from heaven. Can you believe it? On the eighth sacrament has come to this lowly figure right here. I stand in awe. You say, well, after that, you're going to be sitting in awe because it's very beautiful. So let's, I'm going to take and put up aside here because I want to be seen. And I'm going to take 18 and 19 out. So that'll be our goal. If we possibly get to, yes.
Chapter 18 last week. We finished 18.
So we finished chapter 18 last week. I was just getting to that. In my adoration of the yeah, well, let's take a quick review of 18. What do we have there? We have the parables, all these parables, you know, parables one after another. Recall that in some of the things that we had at the beginning of our sessions is that the number of I call them parables that are phenomenal. And Luke is the great parable talker. We don't get that in Mark's gospel. We get some of the parables, but we don't get as many. Matthew has quite a few because he wants to associate us with the Jewish heritage. In other words, for Matthew, we start at the year 1800 with Abraham, and then we go to 1350 or so with Moses, and then we go to 900 with David, and then we go to the era when we had minor prophets, but then 0 prophets, and then we start again with Jesus now as being there, and the great prophet comes, and the greatest of all the prophets, and that is John the Baptist. And then he says, I am not worthy that to even untie his shoes. And then we get Jesus. So what we're dealing with there then is we've already moved kind of through these parables, because when Jesus gets to Jerusalem in Luke's gospel, he's not going to be taken up with as much of the parables, but he is going to be giving us, because he just can't stop it. And so now we're going to go to Luke chapter 19. And we have a commentary here by Bishop Barron. It says, this is for Luke 19, 1-10. Do you have that page? Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, let's go through this first, and then we'll be able to do the actual text. So might as well do the, he has himself arranged in his writings and things like that, various places that where he put things like this. I have a shelf of Bishop Barron's books. They're phenomenal. And he left here in Illinois. He grew up on the southwest side here, and then went off eventually to the seminary, and then he went to France. And the École Biblique is both in France and in Jerusalem. I had visited the one in the Jerusalem. A friend of mine was a Dominican scholar, and we went down into the basement. And in the basement, which was like this, a beautiful side wall and stuff like that, very smooth and everything like that. And we looked at, and I saw all these plaques, and they were where the Dominicans were buried in Jerusalem. And said, then I look over here, and it's got his name, Jerome Murphy O'Connor. He says, what's your name there for? He says, because I want to get ready. I want to have people walk by and say, well, where's he at? There he is. So anyway. So this is a Bishop Barron. When he studied in France, he really got the best of the European scholarship. The other is in Munich with Karl Rahner. Our Benedict XVI ended up being a scholar for the city of Bonn. because the Vatican Council was going on when we had Bonn, as opposed to the time when Germany would take over East Germany and become one country again. I think I might have told you that I was invited by the Secretary of State of Germany to come with another entourage, maybe about 12 to 15 of us. Most of them were higher up, like chairman of the department of something or other, like the man who was in charge of the Department of Education for Wisconsin was one of the people that was there. And so anyway, they picked lowly me because they said, well, we got all these very, very learned people. What we need to do is to have some kind of a cork or a sponge or something like that of nothingness, so that we can compare, to show them what they're getting, something not like him. So anyway, I enjoyed Karl Rahner and Benedict XVI. Because when we got there, they had our man, there was a plan for 12 days, and it got one day after another after another. We had 3 days in Bonn, then Stuttgart, then Munich, and then Berlin, 3 days each. And so but they knew that I was, Catholic, and in Germany, Catholic schools are run by the government. So they had a limo for me. We went over the Rhine River. Yes, we did. And we got there at 10 o'clock in the morning, and the principal of the place was welcoming me and to take me a little tour of the school and stuff like that. Then we sat down and we talked about things. I told him I had started as a math teacher, and he says, oh, yes, yes, yes. He goes up to his shelf and he pulls off the math book that they use for their classes and stuff. Yeah, well, he wrote it. So I copied it. So then they bring in a tray, with a kind of a cart, a big pile of donuts and all that kind of stuff. They go wild on that with some coffee and stuff like that, and a bottle of brandy. Now it was 10 in the morning, as I recall. So he's a very hospitable person. So then I got back to the other parts of the tribe. So let's continue here. In his Word on Fire commentary for the story of Zacchaeus, he says, Bishop Barron writes, he says, story of Zacchaeus recounted in today's gospel is a particularly clear example of one of the most basic principles in the spiritual life, namely that moral reform follows rather than precedes the arrival of grace. Most of us are in the grip of what Thomas Merton called the Promethean attitude. That is the view that just as Prometheus had to steal fire from the gods, you can remember that, we have to earn the divine love through the heroic living out of certain moral demands. But this is getting things precisely backwards. God's grace always comes first, and often unbidden and unexpected. Then it works with the recipient's cooperation, a thorough renewal. Do you see where this is going? It's saying, it's not like we come to Jesus and say, hey, I have, been a saintly life. No, it's you have the grace to do things of a good nature because of the fact that I am with you, I am in you, you are doing it for me. He did not, Zacchaeus is described as a chief tax collector. So this is on the journey into out of Jericho. A thorough renewal. Zacchaeus is described as a chief tax collector, which means he was a bad man indeed. He did not merit the inrushing of grace. But the Lord accepted Zacchaeus, even though he was unacceptable. And from this invasion of grace came a moral reformation. You see, the reason that way it was hated was their own Jewish people are going around to excise from us the tip that you have to give besides the taxes that you have to give. You have to make a living. So you say, well, your taxes are 100, but I'm charging you 125 so I can get some, food for myself. The tax collector didn't merit Jesus' love with his display of moral excellence. See, remember what happens is he's a short guy, and Jesus comes along, and he climbs up a tree, and so Jesus catches that kind of a frivolity, and so he says, "I'm with you today, and I come into your house." And what he does is he enters into the man and his grace, and therefore he can do all the things that he's going to do. He says the tax collector didn't merit Jesus' love with his display of moral excellence. Rather, his display of moral excellence followed from Jesus' unmerited love. To get this principle right is to get practically the whole of the spiritual life right. See, so that's what he is that all the things that we are going to go through to see are the beauty of what is going to happen with Jesus giving his life up in this life to take us up to the heavenly life is going to be something very noble because it will mean that we too then will have the grace to live a very solid and generous life to others. So let's start with chapter 19. I know it's going to take you some time to get to chapter 19. Yeah, so that gives me perfect timing.
Easy to please.
My toes are starting to tingle. It is warm. The medical people will tell you coffee is the greatest thing for you. It used to be, don't do that because it'll be, giving you cancer or something. But they changed that whole thing in our lifetime. Thank God for that. Zacchaeus, the tax collector. Okay, so this is how we start. Now, if we want to get some kind of a sense of this, I'll just start with a little geographical thing. Galilee is the great section up north. It has a vast plain between Mount Carmel and between Mount Horeb, I should say, another mountain top here, Siloam. So in between that is a flatland, and that's a perfect place for growing crops. And so it's not like that this is a barren place. It's growing as grass and it's vegetables and various other things. And then from the upper part of that Siloam, what happens is there is a river that comes into the Lake Galilee, and then Lake Galilee pours into the river coming down Jericho, past Jericho, and then goes into the Dead Sea. So, and there is a kind of a mountain range in from the top to the bottom. So what's happening is that Jesus is coming probably to the north side of Jericho. It is a huge place. Kenyon, Madam Kenyon excavated this place back in the 1930s. And so you think that how do you excavate a place like that? Do you just kind of go in and you shave off everything off the top and keep going down? Well, then you got nothing left. So what she did was she drew a great big circle around the whole town. And then she made a kind of like a pie. But the pie was not like a triangular thing because it takes too much. So she just took a straight line like this and started in the center and drew that in. So now you're there because these cities have been rebuilt several times. I was in Troy, you know about Troy, the famous Troy. I was at the bottom of the city of Troy. Yes, I was. There were 8 other cities above it. Can you believe that? So anyway, over here we get a wall, and from that wall you can interpret, archaeologists can, on what was in that city at that time. So now he comes along. Now this guy, the crowds are out for Jesus. They want to see, what this activity is. So it's either on the very north side coming into town, but more likely it was leaving town and getting out. And so let's start with our reading here. He came to Jericho and intended to pass through the town. So see that would be like this. Oh, there's a dog barking. Well, hold on. Yeah, I said I should have another sip of what? Oh, okay. Yeah, here's to you. Okay, so now he says Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector and also a wealthy man. So he was seeking to see who Jesus was. And see what I said, Zacchaeus is some think that perhaps on other people's money. He says was a chief tax collector and a wealthy man. That's how he got to be wealthy. He was taking your taxes. Our taxes here in the States are going to be jumping all over the place. He says, I was seeking. Don't dump on Zacchaeus. Talk to him as if he's a nice guy. Okay, thank you. Well, we have to keep our stuff together. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but he could not see him because of the crowd, for he was short. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree. See, I put down there that this is a regeneration, a transformation, a nature culture with emphasis on energy. Well, all of that is taking place here in this particular thing because they named the type of tree that he's taking. It's not just like an elm tree or some other kind of tree. No, this is a sycamore tree, which means that it shares in its produce. And so it is something of the earth that we should ourself look with great relish, no pun intended. And so in order to see Jesus, who was about to pass that way. So when he reached the place, Jesus looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down quickly. This is all the movies of this particular scene are there. You know, you see some guy up in the tree and now he's got to climb down. For today, I must stay at your house. See, now he doesn't say, would you invite me? I'd like to go, you know, where you live, how's your family? Instead, he says, I must stay at your house. So I put down there Jesus, I put down dinners at various times, but here people do not invite Jesus. Jesus invites himself. As I told you, there's 11 times in the Gospel of Luke that Jesus goes to dinner. As I told you, it's the Gospel of the menu. And so he came down quickly and received him with joy. Received him with joy. This is like the parables. And as opposed to the reality, because the parables were, you know, the lost sheep or something like that, or the lost son and things like that. So there's great joy because of the fact that the redemption has taken place. Well, that's what happens here. He says, I must stay at your house, the dinners at various times, but here people do not invite Jesus. Jesus invites himself. And he came down quickly and received him with joy. This is a powerful scene for a short man. Job is despised. Job is the one who says everything is vanity, vanity of vanities. His first opening line of the book of Job, a vanity of vanities, oh vanity. So Job is despised. In other words, everything is not vanity. Why? Because Jesus is there and he picks on a person to join them. And it's not the leaders of the town or anything like that. And it's not necessarily a sinner. It could very well be, as we get into the text, that our man has done his job fairly well. In other words, he's taken his thing, you know, his fee, but he has not stolen from them. Why do we know that? Well, because he said, if I stole from people, he says, I'm going to pay it back, you know, twice as much, 4 times as much. So we'll get to that. He wouldn't be saying that if he was cheating everybody. He'd be broke. When all saw this, they began to grumble, saying he's gone to stay at the house of a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, and notice I put down there that he is the chief tax collector. He says, behold, half of my possessions, Lord, I shall give to the poor, and if I have extorted anything from anyone, I shall repay it 4 times over. Wow, I say here, this is repentance. It is incredible. Wow, that he's going to actually kind of take and find out who he has cheated and then pay. No, I don't think so. He has made this promise. He wouldn't make the promise if he had to do it. He says, and Jesus said, today salvation has come to this house because this man too is a descendant of Abraham. See, that is the uttermost, you might say. He's a descendant of Abraham or of Moses or of David. Remember the blind man, Bartimaeus, David, son of David. So Jesus' role is a savior. God's covenant with Abraham is put there. Abram, of course, is the original name. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save what was lost. If you follow this, that this is kind of a parallel to a parallel. It's because in the other encounters that we have with the parables and things like that, which are stories, we get actually now here with an actual event. And so these parables have come to life. You know, the prodigal son, if that has an echo here, or some of the other type things, they would have an echo here. And so for the Son of Man has come to seek and to save what was lost. Then what we get are these parables. And the first is the parable of 10 gold coins. While they were listening to him speak, he proceeded to tell a parable because he was near Jerusalem and they thought that the kingdom of God would appear there immediately. See, they thought that, wow, this is going to happen. I put down, this is considered to be the oldest city in the world, but Now we have discovered another one in southern Turkey, which is even 5,000 years earlier. So he said, a nobleman walked to a distant country to obtain the kingship for himself and then to return. See, and I put down here, it says, a play perhaps Archelaus does to Rome to get Kino ship since his father died. He gets a governor rank instead. Jesus went to Caesar Augustus. And so what we're talking about them is that what we're getting is a nobleman set off to a distant country to get the kingship for himself. So Jesus is making a parable out of this, a story out of this. He called 10 of his servants and gave them 10 gold coins and told them, engage in trade with these until I return. See, he's kind of imitating Caesar Augustus, who is the emperor. And so this guy, you think, is going to go to unseat the emperor? No way about that. He'd be thrown to the lions. So his fellow citizens, however, despised him, sent him a delegation after him to announce, we do not want this man to be our king. But when he returned after obtaining the kingship, he had the servants called to whom he had given the money to learn what they had gained by trading. So you see, this is a clever parable, but the king could be Jesus himself. The Jesus has come to them, and he has given them all that they need to lead an enjoyable, not just a flat, but an enjoyable, joyful life. When he returned after obtaining the kingship, he had the servants called to whom he had given the money to learn what they had done. So the first came forward, sir, your gold coin has earned 10 additional ones. Well, that's what you like to have. He replied, well done, good servant. You have been faithful in this very small matter. Take charge of 10 cities. Now, this parable is incredible. Can you imagine what a city is in terms of the taxes that they turn in? They about 90% of the empire at that time were small cities or farms or things like that. So don't think there's only 4 big ones. It's Rome and Ephesus and Antioch and down into Egypt. And so those are the big ones. But the other cities are smaller by because, well, it's a farm kind of time. About 90% of the people there are farmers, just like, well, in the United States, go to the United States back in 1890. What was the major occupation? Farm work, and so you had smaller cities. So anyway, sir, your gold coin has earned 10, been faithful, take charge of 10 cities. Then the second came, your gold coin has earned 5 more. Says, oh, that's very good. So you get 5 cities. Then the other servant says, sir, here's your gold coin. I kept it stored away in a handkerchief. Now, if we take what the gold coin is our own personal soul and our love of God and love of neighbor and love of everybody. In other words, we are given the joy of life. And what this person does is he kind of puts himself into the closet or doesn't put these things into action, where you actually are determining that other people are going to be in the love of Jesus too, because of the fact that you had the love of Jesus. And so I was afraid of you because you're a demanding person. You take up what you did not lay down and you harvest what you did not plant. He said to him, with your own words, I shall condemn you, you wicked servant. You knew I was demanding person, taking up what I did not lay down and harvesting what I did not plant. Why did you not put money in a bank? Then in my return, I would have collected it with interest. See, the word that is used there is a mina, which is a part of a drachma. Drachma is for us a buck. These are some big bucks. Are we okay so far? And what have we adjusted to? The fact that Jesus is telling a parable, but in typical fashion, he is hidden inside, but he is not hidden inside to the people that he's with. He's hidden inside to himself. He is the one who becomes king. I mean, he doesn't say then a landowner or something like that. How about that parable that they had with the people in Matthew's gospel, where they were out there in the vineyard and they decided to kill the messengers? And who were the messengers from? From the owner of the vineyard. And that owner was the symbol of the Father. And he sends prophets who were the ones who were doing the work of the vineyard. But then they decide, if we kill the people from the prophecies, which they do, Jeremiah, think of him, they put an axe in his head. And so they kill them. And so what they're doing in the parable is Jesus is telling a parable of them. And then when they start to understand, uh-oh, what happened is they went outside the city walls to condemn somebody to death. See, and so what's happening is somewhat similar here, is we get a semblance of Jesus being in the parable, except this time it's not the Father necessarily who is the king, but it is the Son, who is Jesus himself. He said, with your own words, I shall condemn you, you wicked servant. Why did you not put money? Okay, now we're going to go to the next page. Talk to me.
In those days, there could have been banks that paid interest.
No, the storage. Yeah, they didn't have all the sophistication that we had. However, the biggest investment you could have is land. So, and you might not even use that land. First emperors of the time after Jesus and stuff like that were taken over by people in the land, which would be the present day Greece or Turkey. And so that was the way you judged things. From looking across from the Italian part to where we would call various countries right now. That's where Domitius was there. He got a huge piece of land, probably 10,000 acres or something like that. So that's what you would want. Of course, they have a lot of good stuff. They have food coming in. They have water. They pay for all that. They have great huge things that bring in a pool of water, a river, small river of water coming in one time. So let's continue. So now I'm going to turn the page to verse 24. To those standing by, he said, take the gold coin from him, give it to the servant who has 10. This doesn't seem fair. I mean, he's not getting a second chance. So Jesus is very strong with this, because as we're reading this gospel text and stuff like that, we're sitting around a campfire at nighttime or something, and we're hearing about this particular thing. We're thinking automatically of ourselves. Are we the ones who have been given the glory, the 10 coins, the 5 coins, and what have we done with it? And so some of the people who are going to be executed, they might say to themselves, I did it. I did it for Jesus. I took it for Jesus. This piece that I read for you of prayer was from a Catholic cardinal caught by the Chinese, imprisoned for 13 years before he died. And because of the way that they treated their people, he was in a cell. He didn't get a lot of food, not a lot of air, a lot of friendship or anything. He was just there. So by himself, and he turned himself into a prayer machine and developed prayers. And so that's what you have here. And he would write them and then sneak them out through some of the guards. So let's continue. They said, sir, he has 10 coins. I'll tell you, everyone who has more will be given, but from one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. Now, as for those enemies of mine who did not want me as their king, bring them here and slay them before me. This is not a pleasant little story, is it? It is of consequences, and the consequences are severe, which is that you are now separated from the goodness of life. So, reminding us of the elements of supposed king. This title will be placed on Jesus by Pontius Pilate at the time of crucifixion. Slur on him. Oh my. Let's back up on this. Did we catch that? That the title of the man in the parable is the king, and he's the one who's poured out the gold, and it's going to give you a joyful life. And if you do not enjoy that particular thing from the king, if you kind of walk away from him, that would be the crucifixion. So Jesus, and the story is good enough to know that when Jesus is carrying the beam, because the regular pole is in the ground already, most likely he's carrying the beam. He's got something around his neck, and it's a big sign, and it says, Jesus Nazarenus Rex Judeorum, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. That slur was also written in Greek and in Hebrew. So, but anyway, Latin. So, my goodness. Am I making some sense here? I think so, that this is the supposed king is really Jesus himself, hiding himself in the parable. So now the entry into Jerusalem, after he said this, proceeded on his journey up to Jerusalem. Notice how you go up to Jerusalem, no matter where you're coming from, it's always up, because it's the highest level around half mile up in the air. Then he drew near to Bethpage and Bethany. See, what you do is when you come down through the Jordan River Valley and stuff like that, you go up through all the crevices and stuff like that. You don't walk straight up to Jerusalem. What you do is you walk up to behind it. And that's where Bethlehem is, and that's where Bethany is, and that's where Bethpage is. The place called the Mount of Olives, he sent 2 of his disciples. Are you getting a sense of this? You have the city of Jerusalem. You have kind of a very steep kind of slope down, and then a rising hill over here, which is the Mount of Olives, then a sloping down here. That's where I lived when I was there, is the backside of the Mount of Olives. And it only has water in it a couple of times during the year. There's 2 rains, and so that's when it has water in the Kedron Valley. So anyway, that's what's going is we're coming around now from the north, and we're coming down to the south, and now we're going to go into Jerusalem. And the Great Gate is there. It's no longer there because it's sealed off, but it was through the Kedron Valley, and it is the Golden Gate. And so Jesus is going to make the thing. Now, I was at the Passion Play in Ober Ammergau. And in order to be in the play, you have to be living there for 20 years. You cannot, bring in clarinet players or violin players or Jesus or everybody is from the town, and you wear your garb and stuff like that. Yes, I woke up one morning and this guy was getting on his bike, and I saw he's got his garb on and stuff. Then I saw a big bag on his side here, a money bag, and I said, "Oh crud! I lived in a house next to Judas." Oh, so later on, I saw that he was behind a counter in his store, because they have a break, a couple-hour break. And so then you go back. This guy was selling all kinds of stuff. So, well, it's a visiting town. So anyway, so let's continue. He says, I put down here 5 miles upon paved road, or east a quick road. So you have ways in which you can get into Jerusalem. He says, go into the village opposite to you. As you enter it, you will find a colt tethered on which no one has ever sat. Now, that is a prophecy of Zechariah talking about this famous, not horse, but donkey or whatever you want to call it. He says, untie it and bring it here. See, it's not a war horse. Jesus is not going to come into the kingdom with a war horse. Now, in the Passion Play at Ober Ammergau, since the stage is on the outside and you are in a covered area inside with a slope up of seats, they had almost 600 people on stage. So when Jesus comes in on a donkey in the play, he's walking on the outside, and all these people are surrounding him, and they're going crazy, singing Alleluia, Alleluia, and so they're waving their palms, and they're putting palms down. They're taking off their coats and putting them under so that the donkey can walk on a nice road of cloth as opposed to stone. And Jesus is there, and he's there, and you got palms all over the place, people waving palms. Yes, we're going to get to that, are we not? Palm Sunday. Do we have to go far? Yes, you have to go all the way across the foyer. Okay, so you come in the door, and then you got to go all the way through there. Wow, this is going to be a big parade. So anyway. So he's not a war horse. This is a prophecy. As I mentioned, that was the prophecy of Zechariah. If anyone should ask, why are you untying it? You say, the master has need of it. So those who had been sent off went and found everything just as he had told them. And as they were untying the colt, its owner said, why are you untying this colt? They said, master has note of it. Now, by the colt, I don't have the wisdom on this, on the various types of horses and things like that. But the colt, it seems like, is a young horse. Am I correct? Something like that. That would be a colt. So that's the way that Jesus is going to enter into the city, as opposed to on some great big huge thing, from Budweiser, one of those great big giant horses. He said, the master has need of it. So they brought it to Jesus, threw their cloaks over the colt, helped Jesus to mount. See, because this is, you cannot have a thing where Jesus is going to be walking around. And so I have a little meditation on this. The King Christ should travel in such an entourage is indicative. It reveals the precise crowd of courtiers he chose, a band of shameless beggars. We must prefer more semblance of decorum, honor guard, less ill-mannered, contagious, and pushy. The Lord's dignity suffers no slight, however, from the needy company he keeps. After all, the truth is that the presence of this man, all the world is a hanger-on and a beggar. He who made himself a little while lower than the angels has by right the ceaseless worship of the seraphim, the praise of all nine choirs. For such a Lord to walk in this world of mortal clay is to clothe himself with rags. What would it do to clamor here after the paltry trappings of human glory? So we think of the place of coming in, from the north and stuff like that Jesus is going to be treated as a king. Well, they're going to be giving us that kind of way of looking at things, and we agree to that. But does it mean that he is not walking also into the midst of sinful people, people who are kind of down in life, people who are uproarious about others, all kind of things like that? Do you think all of these people, certainly in this image that they had in the Passion Play, they all loved Jesus there, but are there some people inside who just do not get along and are, yeah. So anyway, evil survives as well. So they brought to Jesus, threw their cloaks over. As they rode along, the people were spreading their cloaks on the road. Now, as he was approaching the slope of the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of his disciples began to praise God aloud. See, now it's the whole multitude of his disciples. So that's key to us, because there it would be on the edge of the city, a lot of people that we see it here all the time, people standing at Cass Avenue and 75th Street, somebody standing out there with a sign, please help me because I'm poor, I'm broke, I need help for my family. So you see that. We even have somebody in our parking lot for Sunday masses. So anyway, so people are doing that. So this is his disciples, though. These are the people that are already named and honored by Jesus. They began to praise God aloud with joy for all the mighty deeds they had seen. So what we're getting here is kind of an entree of Jesus by people who know what he's been doing. So these must be Galileans and others along the way. So all the things that have happened in Jesus' miracles and sermons and healings and things like that, they're all kind of going to be represented here. They kind of displace the people who are, at the edge of life. These people are full of life. It says to praise God aloud with joy for the mighty deeds they had seen. They proclaimed. And I put down here, only in Luke is Jesus announced as a king. So this was a royal entry. So, and I'm going to toast that. I think I may have told you I had some students with me way back in the early 80s, and we went to the Passion Play. And afterwards, as people were leaving, I said, let's go around back, that's where they come off, the stage. So all the people are coming out, that were in the play and stuff like that. And who did I see? Jesus of Oberammergau. And so I went up to him with my ticket. And I said, could you sign my ticket for me? And so he puts down his name, and it says, then he puts down AKA Jesus Christus. So I got his ticket. Who else had a ticket to the Passion Play signed by Jesus? I ask you that. Made my day. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest. See, these are echoes, the announcement of the angels at Jesus' birth. Isn't this incredible? There's peace in heaven and glory of the highest. They're coming down to sing of the praise because Jesus the Christ is born. And so this is echoes of the announcement of the angels at Jesus' birth. It says, some of the Pharisees, the crowd says, teacher, rebuke your disciples. He said in reply, I tell you, if they keep silent, the stones will cry out. So I says, could this be an authentic site? The west side of the Mount of Olives. Yes, that's the side that faces the Mediterranean. The back side, as I told you, is the place where I stayed, and that's on the east side. So in other words, it's a big hill. Interestingly, when you get out of where I was staying with the Camboni sisters, I'd walk down to catch the bus, and the bus was at the stop, and the stop was El Lazaria. That's for Islam, for Lazaria, Lazarus. So if you go down further, that's where Lazarus's tomb was. So here I'm waiting, not for Lazarus to come out because he's already done that. So anyway, present day Church of the 50s, Dominus Flavus. Oh yes, okay, I'm sorry. Let's continue. Teacher, let's continue. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest. Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, Teacher, rebuke your disciples. He said in reply, I tell you, if they keep silent, the stones will cry out. The lament for Jerusalem. As he drew near, he saw the city and wept over it. Now there is a church on the front side that faces west, and it is got, I put down in the 50s there, and it's called the Dominus Flevit. Jesus wept. And this is the west side of the Mount of Olives. And we had mass in there one time, and so we were saying the man who said the mass himself was one of our priests, and he had a cancer. He didn't know it at the time, a cancer of his throat, and he later died. But he was the celebrant of our mass because we rotated. There's like 12 of us and Carmelites. And when we looked over to the city, and there he was saying it, and little did we know that we were going to weep, at this sad death. Said, if this day you only knew what makes for peace, how it's hidden from your eyes. For the days are coming upon you when your enemies will raise a palisade against you. They will encircle you and hem you in on all sides. Now, how can Luke know this is being said as a prophecy when he himself, Luke, knows that this exactly took place? Did it not? You have in the year 60, well, let's say 8 to 70, Rome came in with their key soldier, Titus, and they destroyed Jerusalem. Remember the Machaerus, the big plateau outside the city and stuff like that. People go up to a top. They had 400 or so Jews there, and they starved themselves for 3 years because they had plenty of grain. They had great big huge pools of water. How do you do that if you're on a mountaintop? Well, because of the fact you dig down in and don't make a swimming pool, you make a small lake. So when the rains come in twice a year, it fills that stuff up with water, so you have a lot of water. So, but all this stuff is going on. So, if you only knew that this is what is going to happen. So, the days are coming when your enemies will raise a palisade against you. Do you think Luke is, I'm going to say, not deceived us, but told us that this actually happened, and so he wants to put this in there. He says, they will encircle you and hem you in on all sides. They will smash you to the ground and your children within you. They will not leave one stone upon another. That's exactly what happened. See, there's I've told you this before, there is a flat platform, 40 acres, tile floor. The temple is in the middle of that. So when they say the temple, don't think it's 40 acres. That is the land on which it is. It's like, our place right here is not the whole of everything. It is the place where the church is, but the rest of it is still part of our property. So anyway, what happens is when we get this rendition that the stones are turned down, that's exactly what happened. The Romans took to be sure that this would not be a place they could rebuild. The platform stayed because you can't pull down the platform. The stones were so huge. They stay to this day. But what they did was they destroyed the buildings. They also destroyed all the plants around there. They cut down all the olive trees and they salted the ground so that stuff couldn't grow there. And so this is when you have in the year 70 the destruction of the city of Jerusalem. It is fierce. Days are coming. They will raise a palisade against you. They will smash you to the ground, your children. Okay, verse 45. Then Jesus entered the temple area. That means he will go to the temple area. It means probably walking through the door to get you into the first area. And then the second area is where the men are. And so he entered the temple and proceeded to drive out those who were selling things. So he does not get in right away into the interior section, because what he's doing is he's going to throw a tantrum. I apologize there. Oh, thank you. He says, you're doing a great job. This is really a wonderful interpretation. He says, yeah, well, he says, this is just as I remember it. So in this book here, I put down 455 BC, the book by name of Malachi. Malachi was one of the prophets. And he is one of the people that end up the Jewish scriptures. And so what he is going to do is he's going to say that at the end of things, that he's predicting that there will be a cleansing of the temple. And this is in chapter 3. Let me just make one comment here. It's not too relevant to us, but it is. So the Jewish scriptures, the way the Catholics and Christians put it together, end up with this Malachi. And that he becomes then a statement. He says, I'm going to send to you someone like, and it turns out to be John the Baptist. He says, I'm going to send you someone like Elijah. And how is the dress of John the Baptist? Well, animal skins, living on honey and grasshoppers and stuff, which are actually good. You know, you dry them out first, though. Otherwise, and there's no sauce that goes on. So anyway, and they come by the zillions. When you see these things, they just cover the sky and stuff like that. And so anyway, so what we have there then is the very fact of what all this is taking place was prophesied, and I put down the year was 455 BC. Some people say that they have counted up the number of instances of prophecies of large or small sizes of the Old Testament to the New Testament, and it came out to like 600. 300, I'm sorry, 300. Let's continue. And Jesus is saying to them, they were selling things. Now, what is the complaint here? The complaint is that, you know, people do stuff for their own self-good. And why are they upset that they would be selling souvenirs or lunches or other type things? Because all of the prophecies and understandings of what the temple area is that this is a holy realm. And so even though the temple is the holiest place, that's the holy of holies, this is still a holy place. And it says that specifically in the scriptures, that you are not to be taking this. This is my Father's house. So that is Jesus' argument. It's a very complete one and a fulfilled one. He says, my house shall be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. Every day he was teaching in the temple area. The chief priests, the scribes, and the leaders of the people, meanwhile, were seeking to put him to death. So these are the areas. See, the scribes, I have unusual respect. Why? Because they can write. Only 5% of the people there know how to read and write. And so if you wanted to send a letter or something like that, you go down to a scribe and you pay them and they give it to you. Then you roll it up on a scroll. And then you can put it onto the ship, and the ship takes it over to Rome or to Ephesus or some other place. And so it's like that. So every day he was teaching in the temple, chief priests, we know about them, leaders of the people, that'd be the Sanhedrin. They could find no way to accomplish their purpose because all the people were hanging on his words. I put down the areas at the walls for congregating for open air discussion throughout the day. Jesus conducts teaching ministry. By that, I mean this. I'm going to I'll make this to be the temple area. Okay, so you're facing there. So this will be the north and this will be the south. This will be the west over here. Am I right? This will be the east over here. Am I right? Okay. No? Yeah, from where you're sitting. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, that's, you know, and that's where the moon is going to come up, by the way, over here in January. And that's when they decide what are the days going to be for Passover. Somebody asked me at one of our things, he says, well, how come they picked, you know, did it, you know, they did it this, you know, why do they pay 40 days? Why do they have this? I don't know. He might have had scratchy pants or something. So anyway, he was, well, precisely because of the fact that they figure it out when it's going to be. These are astronomers, you know, these people know what goes on with all this stuff. So they're very, if you want to go to astronomy back at the time of Jesus, you go to China. They had the whole map of everything all the time. You say, well, give us an example of that. Well, I always give examples. So here's a painting made in the year 1400 of the family going off to Egypt. And the small picture down at the bottom, but a big picture up on top is the sky. And in the sky, there is the moon and the stars. And so this guy made this, I think it was in July so-and-so year in the year 1400. And so the modern astronomers took a look at that painting, and then they went outside in July for that time, and they found out it was exactly the same. So isn't it incredible? So they found actually, that this that was back there, is the real thing. So anyway, that's okay. So the area of the walls are for consecrating. See, so what? Oh, the reason I did this was this on this edge over here, over on this side here, and then you got this side over here. They have great big huge pillars with a ceiling, and on the ceiling they have mosaics and things that you can look up. And these are the places where people do their teaching in this area, because they don't go inside to do that. They're outside. And over here is the temple itself. So does that make sense? So we're here. Over here is where the fortress Antonia is, which is the fortress built for the queen who built it, wanted to have that for the Romans. So that finishes 18. Am I correct? Is that 19? Yes. And you're saying, he's not used to being backwards, but today he seems to be quite backward. And he keeps getting those messages from the king to shape up. If I held on to that, I would have heard, go to 20, would you? So, you want to take a break for some time, or you just want to move right in?
Move in.
Okay. They had 2 votes, and they both said move in. Say, no, I only heard one. Yeah, behind the other. How are we doing on time? Are we okay? What time is it? 8:02. Oh. Okay. And so that gives us almost like a half hour, right? And you can see we have in your book, this was for in case we wanted to have a check, to see whether or not you follow what we're doing or not. We put in some question. So between now and next week, you might do these. Also in your book, I hope you're reading your book, because your book, echoes this material here, or I echo that material. As I told you, the scholar they have from the north is wonderful, just wonderful. See, the Catholics had good biblical understanding, but it wasn't. It was kind of hidden to the monks and to the monasteries, and people didn't get it. So when they came in for mass and things like that, they didn't quite get a kind of a polish that we can enter into scripture, and not only enter into it, but it can enter into our soul. When I was growing up, maybe you had the same something like this. They had sometimes they had them while the mass was in Latin, and sometimes they even read in Latin. But then they decided, well, we'll read it in English. So then they read it in English. But they don't have the same pattern that we do. The same pattern we have is cycle A, cycle B, cycle C. They didn't have that. It all came with the Vatican Council, and otherwise. And then they had put their scholars to work. They picked out beautiful passages from the Old Testament or from the New Testament letters of Paul as to which one should go to which gospel text. So that was really remarkable. And they were working on that, by the way, at the turn of the century, or the early 1900s. This was not something they just dreamt up in 1950. They were ready to go with all this. So I'm very pleased with our church on that. So now we're at Luke chapter 20. Let's see what the top says. It says the goal is, I can't read it here, Mike. Oh yes, they're incriminating Jesus, discredit him with the people. Well, that's the title right in here too. The authority of Jesus is questioned. Let me give a toast to one day, as he was teaching the people in the temple area, so I identified where that would be on the edge, proclaiming the good news. Now, see, that word there is the way it comes right from Mark, because Mark says, this is the good news. And that became the word that they would use in Old English eventually and become the good news. And so the gospel comes from that. So the chief priests and scribes, together with the elders, approached him. So these are the people that really run the place. There is a Sanhedrin. It has 70 people in it, and one person above that. So you have 70 plus one, and that is the chief priest. That would be in the Gospel of John. That is the one person. Says it's better that one man should die to save the people, because he got along with the Romans. Gives you a clue that the Sadducees are the rich and the powerful and the political, and that they keep peace by doing what the Romans want them to do, so that there's no problems. That's one of the nice things. That Pax Romanum is the word for it, the peace of Rome. And they had nice roads and everything like that. So things were going fairly well. It says the chief priests and scribes, together with the elders. Elders are people who are respected in a community, like a small community. They're not elected, but the people in the Sanhedrin are appointed. They also have a backup a Sanhedrin of 70 people. So if somebody dies, they take the number one out of the people who are the ones that can fill in. Said to him, tell us, by what authority are you doing these things? Who is the one who gave you this authority? And they said in reply, I shall ask you a question. Tell me, was John's baptism of heavenly or of human origin? You see how this is a real pickle for them. Because if they say, well, it is John the Baptist is God's messenger to us, then why don't you pay attention to John's message? Or if you turn John the Baptist down, then all the people who believe in John the Baptist are going to come after you to, engage you in a kind of a fierce argument. So tell us, by what authority? Says, tell me, John baptism, heavenly or human? They discuss this among themselves. Says, if we say of heavenly origin, you say, why did you not believe him? But if we say of human origin, then all the people will stone us, for they are convinced that John was a prophet. So they answered that they did not know from where it came. And Jesus said, neither shall I tell you by what authority I do these things. See? So obvious. It's so obvious that there are piles of things written and said by the prophets. The prophets all the time, from King David all the way down to about the year 500 or so. And then it picks up again with John the Baptist. And so these are all going to be people of great insight into what's going on. And these are the ones we should be paying attention to. It's the dog.
Somebody's dog.
It's a dog.
Yeah.
You know why? Because I hung up on the phone. The dog is going crazy.
I think that's saying it's not clicking. Okay, there we go. Oh, then it shouldn't happen again.
That's okay.
Sorry about that.
Walk.
You're doing fine. Yes, that's good.
Okay.
We'll tell the dog, walk up through chapter 20. I tell you, what a day for me. So we're on verse 6, then verse 7, then verse 8. He says, neither shall I tell you by authority I do these things. Well, the thing that Jesus can say is, I can just name you one prophet after another, after another, after another. It tells you who I am. The parable of the tenant farmers. So we continue. Now Luke does this. If you go to Mark and Matthew, you're not going to get these parables at this intensity when you're in Jerusalem. For them, Jerusalem is this kind of sacrosanct, that it's the events that put Jesus to arrest and then to be crucified, that and the Last Supper. Those are the things. In Mark's gospel, he gives what people would call kind of like the end of the world type talk. And he says there will be a time when everything will come crashing down and the world will end. So he has this in his chapter 13. So Jesus says, neither shall I tell you. So then he proceeds to tell a parable. A man planted a vineyard, leased it to a tenant, farmers, then went on a journey for a long time. See, I put down there, this is Isaiah talks about the people of God as the vineyard, just as he would like a shepherd or something like a shepherd fold. At harvest time, he sent a servant to the tenant farmers to receive some of the profits of the vineyard, and they beat the servant and sent him away empty-handed. So who do you think they are? Well, these servants are the ones that should be, honored. So he proceeded to send another servant, said they also beat him, insulted him, sent him away empty-handed. Now, before we get to the third one here, we recognize that in a parable, Jesus is hiding his victim. And so this victim is the whole crowd here that we're talking about the people in authority, the chief priests, the scribes and the Pharisees and all that, and the elders, all of that. They're all part of this. See, and so they're the ones that are hidden in here. And so they're kind of paying attention to it right now and saying, what's this parable all about? Not recognizing until later that this is about them. And so, in other words, they are the ones who are denying the prophecies. And so then he says, the vineyard song. At the harvest time, he sent a servant to, but the servant they beat up. Verse 11, they beat up another, insulted him, empty-handed. Then he proceeds to send a third. This one too, they wounded and threw out. See how this is amplifying as you go along. First, they sent somebody there, and you don't get anywhere. Then you go get pushed around. Then you get beat up, and then you get kind of wounded. What's next? Well, we can tell, can't we? The owner of the vineyard said, what shall I do? I shall send my beloved son. Maybe they will respect him. But when the tenant farmers saw him, they said to one another, this is the heir. Let us kill him that the inheritance may become ours. See, now, I put down here from the Isaiah, it says, the vineyard of hosts is the house of Israel who failed. So the vineyard of hosts is the house of Israel who failed. See, because what they are going to do is take over the thing. Now, the reason for this is that the guy who owns, I use man, that the family, whatever it is, that owns the vineyard is not living there. It's not like California, where you get all kind of lush grapes and stuff like that, and you live right there. This is not happening. A lot of these would be people who are like from Rome or from Turkey or from Syria or from Egypt or other places, but they own the land and they own the farm and they own the grapes. So they're entitled to the trusting the people that are going to bring them what the profit is. So let's say the profit is 100, and so then they're supposed to give a certain section of that to themselves for working, and then give the rest of it to the owners. However, what's happening here is they're saying, if we spend a certain amount of time, and I'm embarrassed about this, it's either 3 or 7 years. If there's a certain amount of time that if the owner does not make claims on his property, then people can take it over. So the idea here is when they keep sending these people to us here, knock them off. Because what that'll mean is eventually they will have to say, oh, that's too far away from me and we don't get anything, and they keep beating our people up and they killed my son and stuff, forget it. They'll go into pears or something like that instead of grapes. And anyway, I just want to make that point. See, so when it says let's kill him, there's a purpose to that. So they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come. No, I turned you off. Oh. It's my friend of political days long ago. One of my closest friends. So what will the owner do? He will come and put those tenant farmers to death and turn over the vineyard to others. When the people heard this, they exclaimed, let it not be so. See, the crucifixion took place outside the city walls because you can't do death inside the city walls. So that's why they mention that in the parable. See, they threw him out of the vineyard because that's where they're going to kill him, outside, not inside. So all this is a parallel to what's happening with Jesus. I say parable, but a parallel, but it's really the parable. So anyway, they looked at them and says, well, what does this scripture passage mean? Now here's Jesus' conclusion, which again, they don't understand. The stone which the builders rejected, this is, it becomes the cornerstone. So you got two stones that are really important. One is the cornerstone, because that gives you the direction in one way or the direction in another way. So the cornerstone, or for the arch, the center stone, because it, as you build up like this, it needs something otherwise the whole thing's going to fall in and crash. Consequently, everyone who falls on that stone will be dashed to pieces, and it will crush anyone on whom it falls. Scribes and chief priests ought to lay their hands on him at that very hour, but they feared the people, for they knew that they addressed this parable to them. I put down, scene is no longer hidden. All of a sudden it dawns on them, wait a minute, he's not telling a parable about fantasy. He's talking about a parable that is coloring us as being people who are evil. So, paying taxes to the emperor. Let's continue. Where we still yes, we still have some time. Paying taxes to them. They watched him closely and sent agents pretending to be righteous who were to trap him in speech in order to hand him over to the authority and power of the governor, who was Pontius Pilate. Now, Pontius Pilate didn't live there. He lived off on the coastline, but he would come 2 or 3 times a year with a couple of cohorts, and those cohorts would go into the Fortress Antonia, and they would stay there. Why? Because of the fact that they're the police of the land, and they know that there's going to be tens of thousands of people coming for these great ceremonies. So that's why they bring the soldiers in. So that's what's happening here. They watched him closely, and they wanted to trap him in speech to hand him over to the power of the governor, who was Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate was not a very good person. And in fact, the reason that he's in Galilee, or I should say in Israel, which is kind of an out of the way place, is because he wasn't very good. Somebody said, yeah, go to that place. So they posed this question to him, teacher, we know what you say and teach is correct, and you show no partiality, but teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. Is it lawful for us to pay the tribute to Caesar or not? See, once again, they're trying to trap him so that they can go and place him into the arms of Pontius Pilate. Recognizing their craftiness, he said to them, show me a denarius. Whose image and name does it bear? They replied, Caesar's. See, Jesus is having fun with this because he's saying, yes, Caesar owns that coin, so it's his coin, period. They were unable to trap him, see, because something he might say before the people, and so amazed they were at his reply that they felt silent. They repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, what belongs to God, God. Now, here's the meaning behind that. To give the money back to Caesar is obvious because it's money and it's in coins, so you give it back to him. Now, does that mean that Caesar is the powerful one of the world? No. What belongs to God belongs to God. So the people of faith are saying this. Jesus has just said everything belongs to God because God is the creator of all. And you see how that works? In other words, for the believers, this is a great statement. Yes, because of the fact that, yes, skip that Caesar stuff. But for the unknowables, they think, oh yeah, look at that. Yeah, he says he give to Caesar stuff. That's not what he's doing. He's not giving anything to Caesar. Caesar owns that stuff. However, would you rather just own, a couple of centuries of stuff or the whole of eternity? Would you rather have that? So that's what you're getting that by this comment that Jesus makes. What belongs to God belongs to God. Now, the question about the resurrection, and I put in there a quote from Deuteronomy. Some Sadducees, those who denied that the resurrection came forward, put this question to him. It says, the elite class of landed Jerusalem gentry, that is who the Sadducees are, the elite class. They are the ones who own things, and they operate the temple. And they say, teacher, Moses wrote for us, if someone's brother dies, leaving a wife but no child, his brother must take the wife and raise up descendants for his brother. That's the law. He says, now there were 7 brothers. Whoa, yeah, this is, now you can see that what they're doing is making fun of the whole thing. The first married a woman, but died childless. Then the second, see, and what you're supposed to do is a levirate marriage. Levirate marriage means that you got to take your brother's wife and to marry her, and and then through marriage bring about children. The reason for doing this is so that when the brother dies, that you don't stop creating new Jews. You need to have new Jews because of the fact that you have to have the empire is so big. We need to have Jews, and so what you need to do is to have that. So anyway, finally the woman, it says the third married her, and likewise all 7 died child. Finally the woman also died. Now at the resurrection, whose wife will that woman be? For all 7 had been married to her. Jesus said to them, the children of this age marry and are given in marriage. That's true. But those who are deemed worthy to attain the coming age and to the resurrection of the dead, neither marry nor are given in marriage. That's a very heavy sentence, because what Jesus is saying here is there is life after death. There is a resurrection that is going to be based on Jesus. Luke will say, using the word resurrection, because the resurrection has taken place in the writing of the gospel. But what is taking place in this confrontation is that there is going to be, by Jesus, a statement that we are going to live forever. And if you live forever, you do not go to heaven and then start going around to have thousands of people marrying thousands of people. There is no marriage in heaven. So that is the meaning of that. So anyway, they can no longer die, for they are like angels. They are the children of God, because they are the ones who will rise. See, so this is the coming of the age. It's called angelic. And that the dead will rise, even Moses made known in the passage about the bush, when he says, Lord, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. In other words, if you read the scriptures carefully enough, especially Isaiah, you will find that there is hints all over the place that this is not the end of things. Remember in Isaiah, it says all the peoples of the world will assemble on the mountaintop, and go call me up to the top of the mountain. All the peoples. What does he mean there? He's saying that all the people who are alive are going to be up on the top of the mountain, which is heaven. So all you got to do is read these passages carefully, and you will get hints of a resurrection or a life after death. So the dead will rise, even Moses made known. And it says Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What does he mean by that? Well, it means that they are still talking about them as if they are alive in heaven. So some of the scribes said in reply, teacher, you have answered well. It says not all are aligned against Jesus and no longer dare to ask him anything. Do you see what happens? In other words, there's 2 camps here. One camp is to try to trick Jesus. The other camp is to pat Jesus on the back for giving us the thought that we are not here, that this life is all alone. We are here for eternity. Then the question about David's son says, how do they claim the Messiah is the son of David? For David himself in the book of Psalms says, take your throne at my right hand. In other words, David, is on the throne, and Jesus would be at his right hand. And the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. Now, if David calls him Lord, how can it be his son? That's a fair question. Jesus is the authoritative teacher. And so, but what he's saying is that he himself is the one who is going to be David's Lord. Then with the hearing of all people, he said to his disciples, let's turn the page, be on guard against the scribes who like to go around in long robes and love greetings in marketplaces, seats of honor in synagogues, places of honor at banquets, good chairs at mass. Excuse me. Let me go back over that again. I guess the scribes go around in long robes. These robes that they wear, some of them have 12 little blocks on them and stuff like that to remind people that they are 12 tribes, so they're kind of the master of it. Got them all sewed in there. Love greetings in the marketplace. Yes, you bow before them. Seats of honor in synagogues. Yes, you wouldn't think of having a woman in there or a renegade. And places of honor at banquets. Yes. So I had a wedding one time, and the people were kind of rude to me in a way. Because see, I knew the family and their Mount Carmel heritage. But all of their friends and stuff like that were not the Mount Carmel people. They didn't know who I was and stuff. So anyway, so I decided to go to the reception. So I went to the reception and I'm looking around to see, you know, where I'm supposed to sit. I don't see anything anywhere. So I figured, well, I'll just stand here by the bar, and what'll happen is, you know, one of the people come up for us and said, oh, here's where your seat is. Okay, that's what I was saying. So I'm standing, are you ready with now? Here's the geography. Okay, there's all the people, and there's the lonely priest at the bar. Okay, so anyway, and then there's a snotty guy. They brought him in and said, you know, if we pay extra, will you be a snotty person? He said, oh yeah. So anyway, so everybody's there, and everybody's sitting down, and the guy says, well, he says, we're going to start this as soon as we can get Father away from the bar. That's what I said. So I went down, and then somebody came out and put a chair at the edge of the table of, you know, so anyway, I had the salad and left. So yeah, so I understand what he's talking about. They devour houses of widows. See, you know, why is that? Well, because there's nobody to take care of them. See, so if the son isn't there to, you know, then they get the property. They get there first. As a pretext, reciting lengthy prayers, they will receive a very severe condemnation. Devour the houses of widows. They come along and say, we'll take care of you. Yeah, sure. Okay. No, I have this very important phone call. So you have any observations? Are we doing okay? Okay. So our next section, we have 21, 22, 23, and 24. So in our next two sessions, we should be able to handle that. I do have some materials that I'd like to go over. I told you I want to do some things with Mary. I have some things that I can, I'll give them to you. I also have a kind of a quick explanation of the beloved disciple, which is in the Gospel of John. It's a current thing that people have not paid attention to because they always say, well, the gospel writer John was the John of the apostles. It's just not true. And nor is it that John who is at the cross is John of the gospel. No, it is the beloved disciple. And it's very clear that is said 5 times over. Well, remember at the Last Supper, what does you have Judas on this side, and you have over here is John, but it's the disciple John, the beloved disciple John. And he takes and he puts his head on Jesus' chest. Say, why would they allow that, you know, in a big dinner and stuff like that? Precisely because of the fact that he is leaning his being onto the heart of Jesus. And at the Last Supper, he gets then kind of the message of Jesus through a replica of love and care. And so it's quite different than, you know, making a statement or something like that. So this, because then what he can do is not only can he hear the heartbeat, but he can also see out this way as exactly the way that Jesus sees. So he is able to see this. And so anyway, we'll get to that. That help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, thank you all for being part of our time together this morning, and we will see you next week. Have a good week.
Are there, before we leave, any questions or observations? Yes.
So John of Revelation is not the beloved disciple.